All right, this last bit I've called content, but I don't think content's the right word. If that last section that we talked about was sort of the structure of the house, okay, so again, I'm using the analogy of building a house. So you've built the house. This is sort of the interior decoration of that house. In other words, what should go inside the house? Now, I can't tell you each individual sentence to write or things like that. But this is how you do good design inside of a house. So take the information you're getting and design it this way, and you'll have a good looking result. All right, so here's where we'll begin, is the outline. Again, like I said, think of it like a blueprint. When you're writing, it should be sort of the thing that guides you. You stick to it, so because what's really easy, again, is to start drifting off topic, to start going over here, explain this thing you thought was super cool, but actually has nothing to do with your topic. And it just distracts from it. So the blueprint is the outline is that blueprint that you follow. It'll also make sure that you don't forget key things that are important for that. But be flexible where you need to be. Obviously, you don't have to just follow it. You wrote it, you can change it as well. Hang it on a wall where you work so it reminds you what to do. It almost becomes, I know that for me, that towards the writing part of the project, the outline itself becomes like my to-do list. Like, I need to work on this section. I'm bored with that section. I'll move to this section, but I know I can come back and do this. And you're not writing a paper from page 1 to 15 necessarily. You're writing this section, and you're putting them together. And the outline helps you understand how these pieces fit together, I guess is the way to put that. Let me just be clear about this, because this is a really important point. If you have to write a 20-page paper this week, that's really intimidating. Or this month even, this is intimidating. If you have to write a 2-page paper in the next 2 days, that's not a big deal. So I'll bang out this 2-page, literature review in the next 48 hours. And now I've got that piece done, I can set it over here, and now next 48 hours I'm going to work on this piece of it, the operationalization. I'll bang that out. And then and all of a sudden, instead of doing a 20-page paper, you're doing like 6 or 7 2 to 3 page papers. That's way more manageable. Your mind can wrap your head around that. You feel like you're making progress as opposed to just facing this uphill 20-page slog. And it makes for a better paper usually, because you're not just doing stream of consciousness for 20 pages, trying to get to 20 pages, and you're not making sense along the way. You're steering off on all sorts of things. So I would definitely suggest that the outline can help you build it room by room rather than the whole thing at once. All right. Building logically and efficiently. This, if I could just tell everybody this, I mean, nobody ever listens to me on this, but this is how you're supposed to write. And it seems like it's such a painful way to do it, but think of the reader. If you don't do it this way, it's super painful for the reader. And it's this. Every section in your paper should point back to the paper's hypothesis, so the main point of the paper. The topic of your paper is that hypothesis. That is what you're trying to argue. That's what you're trying to demonstrate. Either it is or it isn't. All right, so every section should point back to the paper's hypothesis. Every section should begin with a brief statement of what that section will show. Every paragraph in that section should support that section's main idea. Every paragraph should have a topic sentence that is the implicit statement of that paragraph's main idea. And every sentence in that paragraph should point back to that topic sentence, should support that topic sentence. That's it. Don't add throwaway lines. Don't add lines that have nothing to do with the point that you're trying to make. You have a lot of things to say. I get that. But in this research paper, you're trying to say one thing. And everything else that you say that doesn't support that, doesn't point back to that, is going to only detract from your argument. So this, if you do it this way, build it piece by piece like this even, when you go back and read some of your old stuff, see if you've done that. Does this paragraph support this section? Does this sentence support this paragraph? Okay. Next, argue against yourself. Now don't do this to the point where you reach this point of paralysis, because you can easily do that, where you constantly are judging everything you're doing and saying, oh, that's stupid, and then you end up doing anything. Don't go that far, but definitely be your own hardest critic. In other words, anticipate and address criticisms of your ideas or methods. if you can kind of say, yeah, but what about this, then address that. Even if that addressing is, trying to explain it away somehow, or just recognizing that that's an issue and it needs to be worked on, but it may not be dealt with right here. What is obvious, this is a really important thing as well. What's obvious to you may not be obvious to the reader. I get that a lot where I'm reading through something and they just think that this is so obvious. And I'm going, what are you talking about? What is clear to you may not be clear to the reader. I mean this in terms of writing. A way to fix this, a really important, good way to fix this, is to have somebody read your paper back to you, and see if you understand what you're trying to say. When you look at it on paper, you get that. You made that pattern. But when somebody reads it back to you, you go, oh, what the heck did I say there? What does that even mean? All right, next thing. Vetting. And we're going to actually do this. Well, are we going to do this in class? We might not do this in class. But I'll try and find ways for you guys to be able to do this. But you'll have to do it on your own as well to get enough vetting in. Circulate drafts of your paper and or your outlines with others. I got to be honest with you. This is a really important thing, is letting other people give you feedback. This is not let me say it this way. This should not be a competitive environment. This should not be, if I get an A, you get a B. If you get an A, then I get the B, so I'm not going to help you. No, I want you all to get A's. And I hope you would hope each other gets A's as well. So giving to each other, helping each other out is going to be the way to do that. So circulating these drafts and these papers and outlines, asking people and letting them ask you to read those things for clarity, for holes that they might not see, for ideas that might help them. Very rarely does something have to come purely out of your head. The best ideas we have usually are ones that we bounced off other people, or we have a piece and they have a piece, and together we have a better piece together. Don't take criticism personally, and likewise be honest and polite while reading other people's work. Ask non-majors. I know political science majors or international studies majors, you'll want help from each other, and that's great. For the content, I don't know that I would necessarily go to a biology major and say, hey, can you take a look at my paper about Colombian, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but if that person's good at grammar, if that person's good at writing, then ask them if they'll read part or all of your paper and give you good feedback. I'll tell you what, lit majors, they should be your best friends. Lit majors do this stuff full time and they like it. And I don't know, I would say they want to help you, but they are much less averse to helping you than maybe other people are, just because this is something that they enjoy doing, they think is important. So let them help you be better writers. Go to different people. Don't just only go to your friends. Go to people that you don't know that well. And again, this is a way to make friends, but also a way to get a broader view. Somebody who doesn't know you as well will give you a different type of feedback than someone who is your buddy. So do that. I'll also say this. In as much as when you read something, you look at it and you say, that makes total sense, and it doesn't to other people. Sometimes your friends think the same way, and they won't catch some of those things that the general population is going, what is going on in your head right now? After all this, and this, once you get all this advice back, then you get to decide what advice to take and which to ignore. And that goes for professors as well. Like this whole thing that I'm giving you guys here, this is not requirement at all. I'm giving you advice. You have to determine whether it's good advice or not, whether you think it needs to be changed or not. Someone could come along and say, you know what, why don't you try a different independent variable? I don't think your independent variable is going to work. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. You get to decide whether you take that advice or not. So that's important right there. Okay, let me see. How many do I have? I have two more slides. I know this is going long, but this is really important stuff. Trust me. Footnotes, use them. If you need help on that, go back to your scope and method stuff. Use your footnotes, whatever. Go from there. Don't plagiarize. If you need advice on what that is, let me know, and I will send you the link that we use all the time. Again, I don't expect many of you guys to be outright plagiarizers, where I'm just going to copy that in there. But this thing called unintentional plagiarism, where you sort of use it without really intending to use it, or misquote things or things like that, just as bad. Don't do it. Actively avoid it. All right. Aim for great writing. Readers are going to... Okay, I mentioned this earlier. If I start a paper or I get into a paper and it is bad writing, I don't care if your ideas are great or not. I hate this paper already. Anything that's making me work harder than you worked on this paper is not a good paper. You are trying to make it easy for the reader. And when I say me, I don't necessarily mean the professor who's grading it. I mean anybody who's reading your stuff. Like, your job as the author of this is not just to get an idea across, but to get it across in a way that makes it receptive to the person who is the audience. And that means you may have to take some extra efforts to be clear, well written, etc. Spelling, okay, here's another thing. Spelling, grammatical errors. Those are so easy to fix, to catch and fix. And if they're not caught and fixed, I immediately say, this person doesn't care enough to do simple proofreading. So why should I, in fact, just so you know, another insight to the professor here. When I get a paper that's submitted that has a lot of spelling and grammatical errors, to a certain degree, if I wasn't paid for this job, I would just stop reading, because I don't know why I should invest my time into something if you won't invest your time into it. It's not my job to go through and make sure I understand what you're saying. It's your job to make sure I understand what you're saying. That onus is on you, not on me. As a professor, I sometimes have to slog through it just so I can give a grade at the very end of it. But honestly, if I wasn't paid to do that, I wouldn't. So when you go off and get a job somewhere and you want to write policy paper for, your boss or something like that, if it's not good, they're just not even going to bother with it. Not to mention, you might not get hired in the first place because you're not bringing anything to the table. So this is just such an easy thing. I got to be honest with you. So many people in college, if they just did this very basic thing right here, would probably have a grade higher than they have right now in all their classes, at least their classes that have writing things. Oh my gosh, drives me nuts. Quadruple check your introduction. Again, first impressions matter. All right, last thing. Clear organization and general neatness. This goes along with what I was just saying right there. There's bad writing, and then there's bad organization and messiness. Sometimes indents are inconsistent, or someone has tried to copy and paste something, and so the font's a little bit different or a little smaller or whatever. Just, again, have something that looks good, and whether it's good ideas or not, I'm far more likely to like your ideas. A messy paper distracts from your overall ideas. Inconsistent indents, font issues. There's a number of things like that. Messiness is bad. Don't be messy. The paper should logically progress. Think about, like, if you're building a case, like your job, again, if this is a fictional thing, it's different. If it's even some history is more of a story. This is not a story. This is a case. Think of yourself like a lawyer who's trying to present a case and trying to demonstrate that that person did the crime. How are you going to prove to these 12 people sitting over here, your readers, that that person did the crime? You have to build a logical case with evidence and not assume that any of those 12 people sitting there knows what you're talking about without some evidence for it. So that's our job here, is to produce this case that logically progresses, not just to throw all the information at them, but to structure the information in such a way and to use language so that it is clear to them what's going on. And I would just suggest this is another thing you can do before you get started, is read other articles to find writing and organization that you actually like. There's not one way to do this. Don't even think that at all. How I write is very different than how Lupo writes, how different than Bill writes, and we've all got our PhDs. We're all fine. There are some things that we all do, but our styles are real different. So that being said, as you're out there reading stuff for classes and all that, and for the research for this, find the articles that you get done, you say, totally buy that. This was super easy to read. I like the structure and how they structured it. I'm going to put a little note next to that, save that, and then try to emulate that. What did they do that you liked? Like, for example, I like putting things into sections that are headed. I don't like one long 20-page paper. I get lost in that as a writer and as a reader. So I always break things into sections. That's how I like it. That doesn't mean it's right. It just means that's how I think is a clearer way of doing it. And so that's how I tend to do it. Other people will have long paragraphs. I don't tend to have long paragraphs, but that's just the style thing. So think about the style that you like, the style that you think works for you, and find articles that emulate that. And then try to do that. All right, that's it. This is not enough. I mean, let me say this. It's a lot. I'm not trying to overwhelm you guys. I would say probably only about a third of you, if not less, are still paying attention here at the end of this video. I totally get that. Don't take everything that I've thrown out here at you. Take the things that are useful to you. But it gives you places to begin. If you get lost, come back to this, not necessarily this video, but come back to this outline that I provided and see if there's a place where you can sort of step in and say, well, I don't know what to do today, but I can do this one thing. I can develop what is the constructs of my dependent variable. If I do that today, I've made progress, and every day make a little progress. And you'll find that by the time it comes to actually sit down to begin writing this paper, you've got so many pieces put together, and you've got a structure that you're not starting from square one. You can sort of do this now, still in pieces, but it's not quite as daunting as it is sort of right now. What I'm saying, I want you to write a 20-page paper by the end of the semester that's going to solve a conflict. Go, right? It's going to be easier than that if you follow some of this advice. All right, that's it. Have a great weekend. See ya.